1939, German forces invaded Poland, bombing bridges and streets, killing soldiers and civilians alike. The same day, Great Britain and France gave Germany an ultimatum: withdraw forces or we declare war. Germany continued further into Poland, and 2 days later, both countries followed through on their threats. These declarations signaled the start of one of the most terrible wars in history, a war that would claim over 60 million lives, according to the BBC, 2/3 of whom were civilians. It was the start of World War II, and these soldiers were acting under the orders of Adolf Hitler. Well, everyone knows Hitler was the leader of the Nazi Party and responsible for the deaths of millions of Jews throughout the war. Not as many are acquainted with the man himself. Where did this man come from? Was he always the monster we see him as today? Where did his love of war come from, or his strong German patriotism? What caused his terrible anti-Semitic beliefs? The answers to these questions can be found in examining the first half of Hitler's life. We can see the seeds that led to this horrific war in his childhood, his early teens, and his adulthood. Adolf Hitler was born on April 20th, 1889, in Braunau, a small Austrian town near the German border, to Clara and Adolf Hitler. Although Alois had 6 children with his third wife, Clara, only Adolf and his younger sister would live to adulthood. As a small child, Adolf did very well in school, and it was thought that he would have a very promising academic future. He was also strongly devoted to his church, where he sang in the choir, and for 2 years, he was strongly considering becoming a priest. It was at this church that he first saw a symbol that would later come to represent terror. This old monastery was decorated with woodwork that included several swastikas, a symbol that used to represent good and was common in many religions. As a child, Adolf loved to read, and one day as he was rummaging through his father's book collection, he came across several about war, including a picture book on the war of 1870 through 71 between the Germans and the French. This was the start of an obsession with war that would carry throughout his whole life. He would spend hours reenacting battles with his friends, and when they grew tired of the sport, he would leave them to find new friends to carry on the game. As a child, he was carefree and happy. He was popular and thought of as a leader. But all of that would change when tragedy struck the Hitler house. On February 2nd, 1900, his younger brother Edmund died from the measles. To make it worse, he was buried in the graveyard right behind their house, where he could see his brother's grave from his bedroom window. His brother's death was a terrible blow to him. His days of carefree playing were gone. He became sullen and bitter. Contributing to his bitter attitude was his father. As he neared the end of his primary education, the time to choose what type of secondary school he would attend drew near. While Adolf loved to draw and dreamt of becoming a great artist, his father had another dream for him. He wanted him to follow in his footsteps to become a civil servant, a career that held no interest for Adolf. This disagreement led to a growing distance between the two of them. And when Hitler was sent off to school in Linz, he was very unhappy and did poorly in school, later claiming he did so intentionally, hoping his poor grades would prompt his stubborn father to allow him to return to his own dreams. When he did poor in school, it was here that he first learned of his love for German patriotism. Although he was an Austrian citizen, he grew up near the German border. Crucial in his development of German patriotism was his history teacher, Dr. Leopold Potsch, who often enchanted the boy with tales of great German figures. Around this time, he also developed an interest in the opera, particularly German opera, where he first grew to love German music. Further contributing to his German patriotism was his father, who had worked as an Austrian imperial customs agent and was very devoted to his homeland, prompting his rebellious young son to lean towards Germany. Him and his friends would use the German greeting of Heil and sing the German anthem rather than the Austrian one. Had his life stayed the same, the story might have been quite different. But his life took a turn with another tragic death of a family member. One cold January morning, Alois Hitler went out for a walk and stopped at his local inn for a glass of wine. Before the wine arrived, however, he collapsed on the ground and died of a lung hemorrhage at the age of 65. Although his relationship with his father had been a difficult one, upon seeing the body, young Adolf broke down and cried. At the age of 13, he was now the head of the household. Although free from his father and free to pursue his own dreams, he continued school for another 2 years. Although his grades steadily declined, and at the age of 15, he dropped out before taking the final exam. After dropping out of school, he spent his days in leisure, going to operas and visiting museums, living off the money his father had left him. Although his mother urged him to get a regular job, he refused. thinking the idea of working daily under a different authority to be revolting. At the age of 18, he withdrew all his money from the bank and moved to Vienna in hopes of becoming a great artist. But when he applied to the Vienna Academy of Fine Arts, he was told that his drawings were unsatisfactory. This was a huge blow to him, as he'd always dreamed of becoming a great artist. After failing to gain entrance to the art school, his life slowly declined, as he continued to try to live his life of luxury on his dwindling savings, until eventually he was forced to live in a home for poor men. During his time at this home, he was able to obtain a meager living by selling his paintings to local shop owners, to put in their windows or to fill empty frames. He spent his days at the home talking politics outside or giving speeches. He would often go into a rant if anyone disagreed with him. As his interest in politics grew, he began to notice the pan-German nationalists and the Christian Social Party, both of whom had strong German patriotism and held anti-Semitic beliefs. Although when he first heard anti-Semitic rants, he was put off. As he began to notice the Jews around him, his views shifted. He immersed himself in anti-Semitic literature and would spend hours outside simply observing the Jewish Germans as they walked past. Although his new beliefs had not yet impacted his personal life, as he still did business with Jewish shop owners and had Jewish friends, the seeds were planted that would lead to one of the most horrific events in human history. By the time World War I came around, young Hitler was very devoted to his German patriotism. Although he had fled Austria to avoid military duty, upon hearing of Germany's declaration of war, he fell to his knees and thanked heaven for being alive, and quickly signed up to fight. While I have only been able to focus on some of the fundamental issues that led to the man he became, Hitler's rise to power is a long, complicated story. Even the parts I have discussed, I was forced to drastically shorten. While his later life is much more widely known, for me the interesting part is the beginning, where he came from. As a child, his love of reading led to his fascination with warfare. In his teenage years, his rebellious nature encouraged his German patriotism. And as a young adult, his time in poverty led to his survivalist mentality and anti-Semitic beliefs. While I don't know how his life would have differed had some of these events changed, and I don't believe these events solely responsible for the man he became, I believe it's important to understand where this man came from, who will forever be remembered as one of the most terrible men to walk this earth.